Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about my thoughts on the third episode of Hollywood Demons that features the Power Rangers. It has finally come out. And so, first, before I say anything, just let me reiterate something in case you're new to the channel or whatever. I'm a huge Power Ranger fan. I grew up with just like with everybody else. I'm in my 40s just like most people, and I still occasionally watch it till this day. I got the merch, you know how it goes. What I am not is a stan. An STAN. I refuse to be a stan to anything. Television, movies, celebrities, music stars, I don't care. I'm not gonna bend over and go with the flow when it comes to like other people and their properties and projects and stuff. I call it as it is. I judge them how I feel like judging them. And I refuse to just cater to like a celebrity. Unlike most people. If you are a stan, you do you, I do me, and stuff like that. But I am not gonna be like this one person I read in the comments talking about, well, if Austin St. John goes to prison, I'll take his place for him. Yeah, you get mental help. Seriously. And so, with this special, I've been like really wanting to watch it. I thought it came on HBO Max. It's actually an HBO show, but it also airs on HBO Max. So all yesterday, I kept checking for it and checking for it. So I'm all like, all right, I'll kill some time. I watch Reacher. I watch a Resident Evil movie. I watch Ronin Warriors. Man, I'm like, when is this ever gonna drop? So then I forgot about it. Then at 3 in the morning, as I'm about to go to bed, it came on, so I started to watch some of it, and I turned it off around 3:50 to watch the rest in the morning. You can save your time and not watch this if you are a huge Power Ranger fan and you know the know. Why? Because in all honesty, this special documentary pretty much just told everything Power Ranger fans have already known. Like if you ever seen like an interview with Power Rangers, if you ever like a whole like conventions, Power Ranger playback, trust me, you know what you know. However, there are small, minute details that even I did not know other than the big conglomerate of information that I already knew. And I was kind of shocked and surprised to know these teeny tiny minute details and stuff. And with that, maybe some of the stars have mentioned it before. I don't watch every interview with them, you know what I'm saying? But like, I was really shocked and surprised to know this. However, like I said, you can save your time. You will get a better, more full detail analysis of former Power Ranger stars, what the show was like, and all that other good detail stuff if you just watch an interview with an actual Power Ranger star on YouTube. All you gotta do is find like a Power Morphicon or go to Kat and Nakia's Power Rangers playback because they tell you things in more specific detail. Here, it's just like, if you're a Power Ranger fan, then you know what they're talking about, but they leave out so much. If you're part of the general audience, then you're only gonna get the snippets of like little things, but you're not gonna know things in detail. And that is quite a shame. Like, take Nakia. When she was on there, she got emotional and she started crying twice. One because of JDF, and the other one when she got fired from Power Rangers. She said, like, literally, like on this documentary, she said like on the last day she was filming, all she did was like cry. And then she's like, can you just give me a moment? I don't know why I got so emotional. But she didn't finish her sentence. She didn't say why I can't even talk. Why she cried. I'm about to say it with a Q. So she didn't explain why she cried. She just said she cried and then went on to like a different like topic. And I'm all just like, did they edit this out? Did she just not say it? Well, I know the answer to it, and you should too if you're a Power Ranger fan. Her and Kat have mentioned on their podcast thing that the reason why they cried and was so upset is because they literally had no idea they was getting fired. They was filming a normal day, just like always, and then Johnny Yon Bosch comes in and be all like, yeah, we're getting like replaced and everything. No, wait, he found out. And no, wait, yeah, he found out, but he did not tell them. And they found out when the new stars came in, and the people was all like, okay, we want you to run these lines with these new stars because they're replacing you. And they refused and everything. Well, at least Kat refused. She was just pissed off adamant. She's all like, I'm not running lines with like Tracy and everything. And, so they cried and they cried and they cried because they literally had no idea that these new people coming into the show was going to replace them. They just assumed it was like a guest appearance and everything. That's why she cried, but she didn't mention that on this documentary. So either she left it out or the show left it out. So you don't really get a lot of the details as to why certain things happen. Like Wapua, the Red Ninja Storm Ranger. They said that, he took his life. He was abusive to his wife. And like he had gotten some trouble before then, and all that was like commonly to each other, so he just took his life. But they didn't go into specific detail like you can find on the internet when you read it for yourself like I did. It turns out that he was abusive to his wife for many, many years. She found some type of like journal or something like that where she found all this bizarre dark stuff in there, and it scared the crap out of her. And he literally talking about how I'm a dark person and stuff like that, and how like he choked her and all this other stuff. So they don't mention how he abused her. They just literally said he abused her and stuff. And they didn't like go into detail about like him being drunk and like getting like arrested or him saving somebody's life. They didn't mention that. They made sure they dog piled on that man, but they didn't mention he like saved the person's life. But they did mention how like he was embarrassed and all this other stuff and how he let the fans down, but they didn't go into specific detail as to why it was so embarrassing when you get arrested in New Zealand and what they do to you when you get like arrested for like drunk driving and stuff like that. So I wish they would have like, did things like that. Also, they left out so many other dark things in Power Ranger history that I'm surprised that like they made a what was the point of making a documentary? They did not even mention David Yost being harassed for being gay. I thought for sure they was gonna mention that, but they didn't even mention it, not even like a little bit. And I'm just kind of like, the dude was harassed. He contemplated taking his own life. He was going to go to conversion therapy. Why didn't they mention this stuff? Was it because like he did not give them permission, or like like what was the deal? Like, what I'm saying? Because I'm thinking to myself, maybe he didn't give them permission, but then it's kind of like, okay, but you talked about all these other people. Like, I doubt Ricardo's going to give you permission to talk about his murder case. I doubt Saban is going to talk about how, like, basically they painted Han Saban, evil. Like, I doubt he, like, gave permission for that. So I don't know why they just didn't talk about it. And if the people did give them permission, why weren't there that many stars doing interviews? Like, it was let's see, it was Nakia, it was the yellow Megaforce Ranger who played Gia. Who's that conspiracy theorist dude that's kind of nutty? Font, Jason Font and everything. Like, he did an interview, and that's about it in terms of Power Ranger stars. But then they had and Aubrey Dubas, but she was just for the pilot. And then they had like one writer, one director, one stunt choreographer, Dr. Drew, some woman who does like pop media type stuff and behavioral like science type thing. Erin from That in the Sun, and what's her name? Tammy Frank, and that's it. And I'm just kind of like, why didn't they get more people to like interview? Like, I'm pretty sure more people would have went on and talked about it because they do it all the time. And you know the show is gonna pay them. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like I'm surprised they didn't like, um do the interview and everything. They only got like a small select people, and some of the people they got didn't even really talk about their show or like the bad stuff that happened on their show. They like when it came to the Gia actress and Jason Font, they mostly just talked about JDF and that's it. They didn't really talk about their experiences on the show and the ups and downs and stuff like that. So it was kind of odd and like confusing. Also, another thing they didn't go into detail was just like, when they said they worked like lots of hours and they got paid a certain amount of money. Now, we finally got to learn how much they got paid, $750 per episode. But when they said they worked long hours, to the general audience, they don't know what that means. Us Power Ranger fans, we know because we listen to Power Rangers talk about how they filmed 3 episodes in one day. And they literally have no idea what they're doing in that episode because they mash all the footage together, and so they don't know which episode is which and which Sentai footage is going with what because they just have no idea. And that they work from the early morning to extremely late at night, over like 13 hours and stuff. I think one person said one time they worked like 19 hours a day. Well, I'm like, holy crap. And so they didn't go into like the specific detail of that. And the general audience who's watching this Hollywood Demon thing, who might not be a Power Ranger fan, isn't getting the specific details that they need because they just skimming around stuff. And so, in my opinion, this documentary, what was really the point? Because you get more information, like, on YouTube and everything. And heck, I've just gone into more detail than this show went into that the actual stars actually gave. And so this is kind of odd and weird. However, this video is for me to give my opinion on all the topics in which they talked about. And some of these like small details I did not know was very, very shocking. And 2 Train, now that's a true hero. She truly stood up in front of everybody, the executive bosses, Rupert Murdoch. I don't know why Hugh Jackman is friends with that man. That man's horrible. But anyway, she stood up for all of them, but then she regretted it. And yeah. And, and with some of these interviews that some of the stars give, I've always said it, believe half of what they say, and the rest is up for you to believe. Only trust them as far as you can throw them and everything. Because at the end of the day, some of them have told different stories. And, like, some of these people just don't seem that trustworthy and everything. And some of these other, like, and Power Ranger stars, they're not real superheroes. They are not the people you see on TV. They are actors. So they are completely different in real life, and some people will completely shock you and stuff. So take what you will at a certain degree when you watch this show and believe what you believe and stuff. Because like Amy Dubas, I'm all like, well, it's about time you finally admitted to something, because this one story about her has been going around for decades, but then I saw an article years ago where she said that's not true, and now she finally confessed to it. So it's like, yeah, like it's about freaking time. All right, so into the topic. The putty patroller who passed out. So we all know they worked them to death, and we all know it was excruciating heat being over in like the desert and stuff. What I did not know is that there was literally a guy who was like a stunt dude who was doing like a putty patroller, and he literally passed out from the hot heat. And so what the studio did was disgusting. They literally said like, here's $100 to anybody that will put his suit on and finish filming and everything. as they took him to like the hospital. And this was in the pilot of all things. And Aubrey Duvall said literally she was not gonna film another scene until they took that dude to the hospital. They were just gonna let him like lay out there. This is cruel and unusual, like just the punishment, in my opinion, to what they put these people through. And the guy is probably like somewhere in his 20s, 30s, something like that. And somebody put that costume on and it was all hot and sweaty, just laying out in the dirt and everything. And they put it on, they kept filming because they had a short time window, a small budget, and they were not union. And the thing about that is like they literally, like in my opinion, it's like was torture and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like that dude could have died. And they also talked about how like sometimes they will get hurt on set. Like Twee said she hurt her leg again. And they didn't even go into more details other than I guess that was like they figured, hey, that's a shocking, tragic thing. I remember one time Walter said years ago that Austin did a backflip, fell on his neck, and as thick as his neck was, he was unable to break it, and then he had to keep on filming after that. There's been multiple Rangers, mostly Pink Rangers, who like hurt their ankles and feet. The light speed Pink Ranger, she hurt her leg and had to film sitting down. I think Valerie Vernon got hurt filming one time and hurt her ankle and everything. And like, Twee hurt. And they did not even mention when like David and Amy got electrocuted because like they crossed some wires and didn't know, like the production crossed wires and they didn't know what they was doing and fried them. And I think she got electrocuted twice. They did not mention this stuff, and that would have been vital for like the general audience to show just how dangerous it was working on this low budget kids show that was like the #1 kids show back in the 90s and stuff. Aubrey Duvall herself. So it's been in question why she wasn't in Power Rangers after the pilot. Many people over the decades have stuck to the story that she wanted more money. But then I read an article a couple of years ago when she said that was not true. And I think it was more than just an article. I think it was a video I saw where she basically said, it had nothing to do with money, that instead she was contemplating where she was going to take the next step in her life. She was dating a guy at that time. I think they was thinking about getting married. They had like an apartment, stuff like that. Did she really want to go across the US and just start filming in this kid show? So she felt she made the best decision by not doing that and continue with her adult life. So I'm like, oh, okay, so then it wasn't for money. But then still, over the decades, many people who worked on Power Rangers, like Walter Jones, like he literally said it's like a month ago on the Jim Cummings like podcast when he talked about how he what happened to his finger and everything, and also about the whole Black and Yellow Ranger thing. He literally said, and he keeps sticking to this story, she wanted more money, and he has never diverted from that story. So she finally said that it was a financial thing. She said like she realized they wasn't going to get paid that much, and maybe she thought, hey, if she signs this contract, maybe she can negotiate something along down the line, but then realized that just wasn't going to happen. And then, of course, seeing what happened to that stunt dude, then she realized, what, this just ain't worth it and everything. But she did finally mention it was about that money and everything. Now, later on you see to where it seems very much like she regrets her decision, you know what I'm saying, because the guy, like, I think she is married. I looked at her fingers and I think I saw a ring finger, well, a wedding ring finger on her ring finger, whatever. And so she is married, so she's probably not married to whoever it was she was married to years ago. And so like she just looked like she wanted to tear up because she's all, you can literally tell she probably regrets not signing that contract and joining the show because, like, seriously, you can make fun of Power Rangers all you want, like the general audience, but Power Ranger fans know that, yeah, you might not get no work afterwards. You might not get no big shiny award or anything like that, but you are going to be immortalized through the fandom till the day you die and pass when you're dead and everything. You will always, always, always be remembered. And then there are like conventions and stuff like that. Your fandom will be huge, even if you never work again. You know what I'm saying? And so she probably realizes that now. And, it's really nice to see her go to conventions. I'm glad they don't leave her out because she was technically the original Yellow Ranger and everything. Most likely with Aubrey, it was probably a combination of both. Like, reevaluating her life and like money and stuff like that. And, but sadly, it is what it is. It's too bad they could never bring her back for like another season, or oh well. All right, so the Black Ranger and Yellow Ranger played by a Black and Asian person. The biggest topic of them all, the thing that's so debatable and people still wonder, was it intentional? Well, as we know, Aubrey is Latina. So originally the Latino actress was going to be Yellow. Sometimes they do this in Power Rangers, I've noticed, where some of the females who were Latina or supposed to be Latina have ended up being Yellow Rangers and stuff. Karen Ashley is half Latina. They wanted a Latina for Z, the SPD Ranger, who is yellow, but the actress, okay, this is what the showrunner said. She came in with the accent, she came in with the look, but it turned out she was not Latina. And so like they were just gonna go for a Latina for Mighty Morphin, but then Aubrey decided not to be in it, and so at the last minute they got Twee. So it really was just an unintentional type thing. And so the person said, they regret doing this now because somebody came to him, like his assistant was all like, the Asian girl is yellow and the black dude is like the Black Ranger, and that's kind of racist and everything. To the point where they made sure they made Karen Ashley the Yellow Ranger and Johnny Yong Bosch, a Korean, half Korean actor, to play the Black Ranger. And so when it comes to the Zach character, Walter has always stated he thought the Black Ranger was cool. He was second in command. He wasn't about to play the nerd as in Billy and everything. So he wanted to be Zach. And so he said it was just like, it just happened that way. It was never intentional. However, on that Jim Cummings thing that I told you, that podcast I told you about, he does state the same exact thing, but he said in 1993, there was no way he was going to be the Red Ranger, meaning that, look, it might not have been intentional, but they could have swapped. The casting people could have swapped. They could have made Walter the Red Ranger, and they could have made Twee the Pink Ranger, but they didn't. So think about that. It might not have been intentional, but there was a little intention to it. Like seriously, Johnny Yong Bosch could have been the Red Ranger, but they made him the Black Ranger. Why couldn't they make the Asian dude the Red Ranger? Think about it. There's even video footage of Walter cracking jokes about how like he's black and the Black Ranger, like go figure. So, people started to see the correlation and everything with the race and like the suits and stuff like that. But like he said, and he stuck to the story for so many years, that he chose to pick to be like the Black Ranger because he didn't want to be the nerd. And he revealed just like a month ago in 1993, there was no way he was going to be the leader being a black guy. And, because it's Hollywood, you know what I'm saying? And it's like the early 90s. So he knew, so my thing is kind of like, okay, saying that and everything, I still stick by what I say. They could have swapped. The casting director could have been like, all right, look, can't make you the Black Ranger because you're black. However, there's something that's always bugged me in that interview he did with Jim Cummings. He said that it was a coincidence, but it's the internet that blew it out of proportion. He said basically just like a couple of people online who wanted to like make it click and make it popular, so more people started jumping on the bandwagon, and that's how this whole thing blew up. In 1993, what internet? Like, the internet wasn't the way it is now. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. There was no MySpace. There really weren't any group chats really at that time. Also, how are we fans supposed to know that it was just a coincidence? We wasn't there. We can't read his mind. You know what I'm saying? And plus, even the dude who said, it was a big mistake doing that, he said his assistant came to him and be like, hey, have you noticed that the black dude's the Black Ranger and the Asian girl's the Yellow Ranger? So it wasn't just people online trying to make this into a bigger thing than what it was. And it's even like, people started mentioning even back in the day. People realized this. So it does make me wonder how true this whole thing truly is. I know he's tired of being asked that, but he gets asked that in every interview, every podcast. So I know he's tired. And so it makes me wonder to what extent and how true this really is. And like I said before, they could have made Twee pink and they could have made him red. Or the casting director could be like, look, you're going to be a Blue Ranger and that's it. You don't want to be the nerdy Blue Ranger, so we'll just make you the Red Ranger. But they didn't do that. Just like they didn't make Twee the Pink Ranger and stuff. Also, it's kind of weird that he got to choose, because he is the only Power Ranger star I've ever heard where that he said he got to choose who he wanted to be. Every Power Ranger star has literally said they make you read, like, if you're a male, they make you read for every male Power Ranger role, and then the casting director chooses who you get to be and stuff. And same thing with like the females. I've never heard nobody say they got to choose other than him. But he stuck by this story for so many years. So many people say it was just like a coincidence that happened. And so I believe part of it was a coincidence and other parts were kind of like he said in 1993, there's no way he's going to be a Red Ranger. Because the casting director's kind of like, all right, look, people ain't going to accept the black dude being the leader and the red guy and the one in charge. So he can pick either other color. And he chose black. And they could have made Twee a Pink Ranger. I mean, they made Cassie pink. So, slightly going off topic, I'm surprised they didn't bring up the whole Will Banta and the whole charity thing. And this is supposed to be the dark side of Power Rangers. I'm surprised they didn't bring that up. I mean, they brought up the whole Austin St. John, like, government money thing, and I'm just saying. Hans Saban, man, they painted this dude like a monster, like the devil and everything. There's no way he gave his approval for this. Like, it can't be, you know what I'm saying? Like, I bet you anything he did not watch, but he probably had an assistant to watch and make sure they didn't throw him completely under the bus or say something that like wasn't true or whatever, But like, I mean, they painted this dude like the Red Devil. They basically talked about how, like, he wanted to get, like, Power Rangers up and going because he saw something, one of the Sentai footage that reminded him of a cartoon. And we all know the story of how, like, he went to all these networks and people constantly, like, laughed at him and rejected him. It's all like, oh, this is never going to work out. And look what happened now. It totally worked out for over 30 years and stuff. And, the show was extremely low budget and stuff. And and he was like a millionaire or something like that. So he could have put some extra dough into that money. But, of course, as we all know, he didn't and everything. I always have a saying, if it wasn't for Saban, we would not have Power Rangers. And if it wasn't for Saban, we would still have Power Rangers today. Because we all know he sold it around the 2000s and gave it to Disney. And, Disney actually did a pretty good job until Disney just simply did not care no more. But then when he bought it back, he completely micromanaged the show to the point where it became so laughable and everything. Worse than the cheesy humor of like the 90s. He kept reverting back to Mighty Morphin, and fans just didn't want that. Neither did the new little kids who were watching the show. Like they couldn't even change their outfits because the actress Sierra said, who plays Gia, she said that like he said this is basically like a cartoon, and cartoon characters don't change their clothes. So civilians could not change their clothes. And it was weird seeing that in their thing. Then, of course, he sold the company again, and look where we're at now and everything. Nothing. And, he really should have treated his employees a whole lot better. However, I've always had my ups and downs of feelings about this man. Like, one good thing he did was, like, when Valerie Vernon got leukemia, he allowed her credits to still be shown in the intro so she can still get paid for the show and paid for her cancer treatments. But it would have been nice if he would have just paid for the cancer treatments and stuff. But it was interesting to hear that one writer or director completely diss him on this documentary because Saban had this whole thing of he made these characters, he can do whatever he wants with these characters. We've heard all the horror stories before, like how they can be replaced and interchangeable, and the writer or director dudes all like, no, we created these characters, because they basically did. He had a creative staff, and the creative staff put everything together and everything. And this is the thing that gets me about billionaires and millionaires, man. It's just like they just don't care. Like they really don't, for the most part. Like, I get it. In order for them to stay rich, they can't spend their money. They have to invest it and keep as much of it as possible and stuff. But, it's hard because, like, you want to appreciate this man because of what he gave us. But at that same time, the way he treated his employees was just horrible. Like, I remember Karen Ashley literally saying she met him one time at the Power Ranger movie premiere, and he had no idea who she was and stuff. And yet she was on his show. But like getting paid 720 to $50 per episode. To a lot of people, that's a lot. But you gotta stop and think about it. They have anywhere between 20 to 40 episodes. So once that's like over, like that's it. Like, you know what I'm saying? And they film multiple episodes a day, and they don't get residuals, and they don't get like money for their likeness and stuff. So they really truly did get screwed. And I remember like Saban's response, they said, was that just be thankful they're on television, which I can see both sides of that. I can see the Ranger sides, where the Star sides, where they're like, they're working their butts off, they're making you millions, and they're getting paid nickels and dimes and everything, while you're just like, yucking up the money and everything. And then I kind of see his side where it's kind of like a lot of these people, this was their first time acting. They had no idea what they was doing. Nobody knew who they were. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like they had the opportunity of a lifetime. So they should be grateful. But at that same time, they shouldn't be like forced to like work that many hours a day, getting paid like very little, getting hurt on set, and just being like kind of used in a way just to make the network and that one man like a lot of money. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like that MCU actress who was in Infinity War, and they wanted her to come back for Endgame, and she said, "You're gonna pay me more money," and they said no. And they should like, you should just be thankful you're the MCU. And when it comes to this actress, it's kind of like, who is she? Seriously, she starred in things, but most people don't know who she is. And she had a very minor, brief role in Infinity War. So why in the world does she want to get paid way more money acting like she's Robert Downey Jr. or Scarlett Johansson or something? But for the Power Rangers, it's a little different because they don't have tiny roles. They have big roles in the show. Recasting Rangers and Tweed Train. Boy, fans got to take a bit of this responsibility when it comes to recasting Power Rangers, because when they replaced the original three, us fans just accepted it, and they're all like, oh, see, the fans don't care. The fans are totally cool with these new people, so we can keep doing it. So fans have a little bit to blame for that as well, but I hate how they told the cast, like, you have to be here at 7 o'clock in the morning. If you're here at 7:01, you're fired, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I've heard other horror stories of them talking about, like, basically whatever the creative staff tells the actors what to do. If they refuse, then they get fired and everything. And, like, especially when they was not union and stuff. And I remember Jason Font said when they were union, they really took things seriously then, because people was getting electrocuted and hurting their legs in the past series. They would not even allow him to run up a flight of stairs. They had a stunt double do it. And also with their civilian fights. Now this totally makes sense when in later seasons of like the Fox Kids era and then over into the Disney, why they didn't do too many of their, well, at least in the Fox Kids era, why they didn't do too many of their own stunts. Because I just assumed they just had no martial arts background and stuff, but some people did, and it was baffling as to why they constantly had a stunt double doing the civilian stuff. And it's because they really took that stuff seriously and stuff. But one thing is a little confusing now, and something I never knew. Tweed's speech to all like the shareholders and stuff like that. The girl had balls, man. Basically, when the original three was negotiating their contracts because they wanted more money, and rightfully so and everything, like, they had some type of banquet event where like Rupert Murdoch was there, horrible man. Hans Saban was there, I think maybe Shuki Levy and a whole bunch of other people, right? Really high up people who worked for like Fox. And she got up there on stage and she gave a huge blunt speech about how she makes them ratings and like they should pay them more. And then as soon as she got off stage, she went to that one writer or director dude, almost like she was outside her body, realizing what she did and everything. It's kind of like, crap, like, what did I say to them and everything? And supposedly she started like bawling in tears, and he told her, it's too late. Like, it's literally just too late. And as we all know, they left. Now, one thing that's interesting, for many years, it's always been speculated they left on their own accord when, like, the studio would not pay them. Now, Austin St. John was on Power Rangers Playback, and he said that originally it was all 6 of them who was supposed to go. But he said, and with a very grumpy look on his face, that somebody at the last minute went behind the original 3 back and convinced the other 2 to stay. Most likely it was JDF, because the way Austin, he didn't say no name, but the way he said it, you can tell it was him. And so like they stayed, and so like the other 3 left. Now what's interesting is that as soon as this documentary hit, Entertainment Weekly put out on social media, you can see it on Twitter, you can see it on Threads, they said straight up that after Tweed gave that speech, the network fired the original 3. So I'm thinking, were they fired, or did they just like say screw it and leave and everything? this is now debatable and everything because it's always been said they just like, they didn't get what they want and they left on their own accord when no negotiation was final. But now it's being speculated that she was fired. And by the way that person said, like, tell me, it's all over now and everything, like, you said what you said, and, like, maybe when they heard her speech, maybe they fired all three at the same time, or maybe they just fired her and the other two were pissed and they decided to leave. So this is new stuff that's like really interesting now. I'm surprised they didn't talk about like other Power Ranger stars that like left the show. You know what I'm saying? Like Karen Ashley. They didn't even mention why she left the show because she was mad about working so many hours. They didn't mention about other people who was in like Power Rangers pilots, but then later got recast, like in Wild Force, Lost Galaxy, Dino Charge and everything. And I forget this one Power Ranger season. I forget what it was called. It's the one with Coda. Whoever that Green Ranger dude was. Dino, was it not Dino Still? Not Dino Charge, I don't think. No, maybe it was Dino Charge. I think Dino Force was like the last one or whatever. Cosmic Force, yeah. So it was Dino Charge. The Green Ranger dude, I still want to know what he meant by that tweet when he said he was going to expose Saban and Power Rangers, but then claimed he was just drunk when he tweeted that. But still, to this day, he bashes Saban online and even defended Austin St. John when he allegedly tried to steal that money and everything. Like, if they was going to interview anybody, they should have interviewed him. I've always wondered also why they didn't mention the rivalry between JDF and Austin St. John. That's like legendary and Power Rangers history and stuff. And I've always wondered what is the deal with Kat and Amy Jo Johnson. Like, seriously, I've always wondered if those two even like each other because sometimes it seems like they don't. And I remember Kat told like a story years ago about the Power Ranger movie, and I think she came on set and she was surprised to see Amy Jo there because she thought Amy Jo was supposed to leave. And like, why doesn't Amy Jo go to like the big conventions with the entire cast and other Power Rangers there? She always goes solo or she only goes with David Yost. Like, what is the deal? Like, I wish they would have talked about that. That's the stuff I want to know because other things I already know about Power Rangers. They also talked about Twee's death, which, a lot of people already knew she was in that car accident and her friend was is quadriplegic now. And I remember her friend was on Power Rangers playback and I started watching some, but then I stopped only because she was never in Power Rangers. So she explained exactly how this accident happened. Maybe she has done that in the past. This is just my first time hearing it, like blow by blow. And sadly, Twee was not wearing a seatbelt. See, I remember sometimes back in the past, people used to kind of like laugh at me when I'll put my seatbelt on. It's like something you're supposed to do. And no, I'm not throwing shade at Twee. May she rest in peace. But you gotta wear a seatbelt. I remember I had this one friend and she's all like, she's alive because she didn't, cause like she got into a car accident. This old friend of mine from a long time ago. And she said she didn't wear her seatbelt that day and that's how she was able to crawl out the car. And if she didn't, it would like explode and blah, blah. So now she never wears a seatbelt. But I'm just kind of like, we got into an argument. I'm like, dude, you gotta wear your seatbelt and everything. You just never know. And it's just like, man, it's so sad that she's gone and everything. And it was even sadder to hear this one story about JDF. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just going by what his assistant said. Like, that JDF was at a restaurant and Twee was like the waitress and she felt very embarrassed. You know what I'm saying? That's a similar story to Ashley Tisdale and Annalise Vanderpool from Disney Channel and stuff. So they brought up Austin St. John. I figured they would. So of course they brought up his money scandal thing and how he did a plea deal and all this stuff. I figured they would talk about it. It is a scandal. It's a dark side of Power Rangers. What I am surprised they did not talk about is everything else with Austin St. John. Everything from him being homeless and like him having an attitude and beefing with JDF for so many decades and everything. Um, the Hitler shirt thing. Like, I'm really surprised they didn't bring that up. Like, Dark Side of Power Rangers, I'm really shocked and surprised. I'm also surprised that they didn't bring up Ferris or Andrew and the disgusting comments they've made in like the past with Andrew being homophobic on like, Instagram. Like he didn't say no slurs, but he said some really odd stuff around Pride Month and then started arguing with fans and everything. It was the strangest thing ever. Like dude has lost it. And like Ferris, dude, man, he was defending a sexual predator and making misogynist comments and some other disgusting things he was saying online. I'm surprised they didn't mention that. The whole curse of the Power Rangers thing. I remember when they had Jason Faunt on there, he thought that the curse of Power Rangers was not getting no acting jobs afterwards. But he's realizing that there's some dark things in some Power Rangers past. And like, because a lot of Red Rangers have fallen, to this curse and everything, and even Jason Font makes me wonder about him sometimes with the whole conspiracy theory thing. Like, seriously, what is that about? But, like, when it comes to Andrew, like I said before, he didn't post nothing homophobic in terms of a slur, but it was during Pride Month, and he's all like, instead of celebrating Pride Month, celebrate like Memorial Weekend or something like that. And it's just like, dude, who are you to tell an entire community, like getting pissed because nobody's posting nothing about like Memorial Day, but they're posting stuff about like Pride Month and everything. Like, who is he to dictate something like that? And then he just started like attacking fans, and the fans started like attacking him. And then he reposts something disgusting by Candace Owens of all people. And it's just like, what has happened to this dude? I know Power Rangers fans used to pick on him about his terrible acting and everything, but he riled against an entire community that has done nothing to him, like the LGBT and everything. And it's like, it's weird because people pointed out, while you're telling people to post about Memorial Day and everything like that and not Pride, he didn't post nothing for that month either and everything. This was like years ago. So he's just a screwy dude and everything. I'm surprised they didn't bring up Hector and everything from like that whole thing with the homeless man and hitting him. I think his name is Mike Coppola. I'm surprised they didn't bring up the whole allegations of him allegedly groping girls on the butt as he takes pictures with them at conventions and stuff. I'm also surprised they didn't bring up the whole Patricia Jaw Lee thing and why she stopped going to like conventions. But speaking of the Red Ranger curse and everything, which the whole Power Ranger curse thing goes beyond not getting like cast in anything, which I've said that before. And when casting directors see somebody done Power Rangers, they don't want nothing to do with them because the writer director dude talked about how he saw Walter on Buffy and like it was literally a cameo. He was expecting, Walter to like fight or do something, but they didn't have him do anything. And it's kind of like, I was surprised too when I saw that. I'm all like, what the heck? Same thing with Nakia when she was on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Or Walter when he was in that Disney Channel skating movie. It's just like, it's so hard for him to get work. But let's get back to this whole Red Ranger curse thing. Ricardo, boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. There are some new details in this I did not know. This is one thing I really don't like to talk about because the dude is dead. But there's been so much like speculation and like pondering. Like, okay, years ago when this happened, I read it on Wikipedia, basically, and I also read in like an article online, basically it kept talking about how like Him and his girlfriend was living in a place, and his roommate like got into an argument with him, and then he said that he killed his roommate in self-defense, stabbed him with like a sword because the roommate like came at them, and and stuff like that. And I said years ago, and I talked about this one time, was that okay? I can get the whole self-defense thing. If it was self-defense, fine, whatever. But it's hard to prove when nobody else is there to watch everything and nothing's being recorded. With that said, even if his roommate was to go berserk on them, you mean to tell me that a grown man with muscles couldn't subdue his roommate or at least knock him out with something? And his girlfriend, who still to this day we don't know who she is, and we've never heard her testimony. Like, you mean to tell me two grown adults could not subdue one man? That's always something that made me ponder and everything. It made me wonder, was it really self-defense or was it something else? Now there's a whole lot more clarity, at least in one person's perspective. Okay, so this is what's so confusing. Everybody's always assumed that it was his roommate he killed, but no, it was the roommate's brother. See, he dated this one woman a long time ago, and then they broke up. Then she bought a ranch and had a bunch of like dogs she rescued, and he claimed to be like a dog like trainer. When he got there, he lived on her property, but he never trained the dogs or did anything. And then he brought his girlfriend to live. And she said she started seeing a dark side to him to where, like, she never met the girlfriend. He kept her locked into a room the whole time and he was isolated. Now, Dr. Drew said that people who are isolated turn to be murderers and stuff. That's not always true, but in some cases it is. I hate when psychologists say things like that. But yeah, some do and some don't. And so, like, apparently he's irritable and has like a anger issues and stuff. And it got to the point where they got into an argument. So she called her brother instead of calling the police. And her brother went to go try to kick him out. And then that's when he got stabbed, but she was not there to see the stabbing. Dr. Drew showed the autopsy and shown that it was more than just a stab wound. He went straight through the body medieval style, like you're running a person through with like a sword in battle. It went through like the abdomen and straight out his back. So he went in full thrust, and you have to have a lot of strength to do something like that to go through human flesh, and plus the sword has to be like very sharp and everything. Now, one thing that's interesting, before they told this story, they had one of the like writers director dude tell a story about him, something we've never heard until now. And they paint it to where he seems like he's a liar. See, the writer director dude from Power Rangers, because see, Ricardo was like the only person with no acting experience in that season. And you can tell when watching. So like, apparently Ricardo said the line wrong, and the director dude made him do it again. And Ricardo apparently, allegedly got mad and asked, "Why you make me do this line over again?" He's like, "Because you said it wrong." And he said Ricardo constantly denied saying the line wrong, and he even had like the audio person replay it, and Ricardo allegedly still did not believe it and refused to like take ownership of saying the line wrong. So with that, and with what this woman is saying, there's a good possibility that his story, might be true, might not be true. He might not have done that in self-defense. He might have some anger issues. Maybe, we don't know. You know what I'm saying? And it's just one of those crazy things. And he's now out of jail and everything. I think they say he only spent 3 of his 6 years and stuff. The legal system, man, like I'm telling you. And it's just still one of those craziest things. 'Cause, like, that whole story of him, the sword, and that guy, something just never clicked. You know what I'm saying? like I said before, just like the Austin St. John thing, they briefly mentioned Pua and stuff. I think that's how you say his name. And like they said, he was violent, he abused his wife, he took his life and stuff like that. I wish they would have went more into his story. I wish they would have interviewed the wife, or at least somebody. Like I've actually talked to an actress, a New Zealand actress, who knew him and everything, and she had nice stuff to say about him. There's this other actor from New Zealand, and he once posted something on Twitter talking all nice about like Pooh and stuff. So every time people ever talk about him, they always say the nicest things. Now, the actress said the nice things before he took his life, and the actor said it after he took his life. And but then, his ex-wife paints a completely different picture of him being very dark, extremely abusive, and to the point where she was terrified for her life. And allegedly, he choked the crap out of her after he chased her down. Then, of course, he got drunk and had to and then he got in trouble for that, for drinking and driving, and like some other stuff. I really wish they would have went more into like detail with that, and but they didn't. And I've always wondered what, because when it comes to Power Ranger actors, I've never heard a Power. Well, I heard one say nice things about him recently last year. The one who worked on his season. And I always wonder, what do some of these stars think about like some of these former Power Rangers that like do bad stuff? Because it seems like in the Power Ranger community, just like with the fans, the former stars, they are loyal to like their fellow Rangers, and they don't seem to turn on them no matter like what. You know what I'm saying? I remember Austin St. John was happy that Ricardo was out of prison. I'm all like, why? And this is when later on, this was before the whole like tax thing, or not tax thing, but the what was that, recovery money thing for like the pandemic that he tried to allegedly steal, and like the Hitler thing. So that started making me wonder about him and everything, you know. They talked about Eric Frank, and I was really shocked to hear all these details because I knew he died, and that's why Jason couldn't go to Twee's like funeral. But I never knew how he died or all the like stuff he dealt with. Like they went into like detail about how he really wanted to be like an actor and stuff, and it never panned out. They talked about how Jason was only supposed to do 5 episodes of Power Rangers and then leave, but then he went on to be like the greatest ranger of all, and he assumed after doing those 5 episodes in Zeo that the same thing would happen to him, but it never did. Even teasing the point he might be the new White Ranger and stuff. And that never happened. At least I think they teased that. When did he come in? Zeo? I know he was in Zeo. Yeah, but I could have sworn he was in the second or third season of Mighty Morphin. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, sadly, he took his life, and like Jason, blamed himself, and stuff like that, took on all that grief. Um, Even though he didn't do nothing, you know what I'm saying? I never knew. 'Cause you would have never guessed Jason was grieving that hard over his dead brother, because he always looked like a happy-go-lucky guy pulling pranks and this and that. And like, I never would have assumed he had all that grief in his heart and stuff. But then they did get into the whole JDF thing, and that was kind of hard to watch because people was tearing up on screen, choking up, and I got a little choked up and everything. It's hard because the dude is like the ultimate Power Ranger. He was he has so many fans. I'm a huge fan. Because Tommy was just like awesome. You know what I'm saying? But even though I was a huge Tommy fan, I always kept in the back of my mind, I don't know JDF. I've heard lots of good stories about him, but I've also heard some bad stories about him. So it's always one of those things that, I don't stand on people. Like, I'm just a fan, but I'm not going to stand, because you don't never know what a person's like in real life. And apparently he was going through a lot of stuff. But it was so great how like they built him up in the beginning, talking about all the great stuff he does at conventions, how he stays there for hours. He makes sure everything is signed. He would even rework his schedule around and flight schedules and stuff just to sign everything. And he'll even do it for free. I've heard millions of stories like that. And that was always so great because he always gave back to the fans. The show said that he might have done that because, like, he realized without the fans, he probably wouldn't be famous because Power Rangers is really all he's known for. Even though he's done other stuff, he was in a story arc in Sweet Valley High. You can watch those episodes on YouTube. There's a clip when he was on Family Matters and stuff. So he's done other things, but of course he's mainly known for like Power Rangers. The popularity of the show rose with his character. You know what I'm saying? But like, I wish they wouldn't leave certain things out because when they talked about the once and always special, they said Jason decided not to do it and he said he's done with Power Rangers. But they didn't explain why he's done with Power Rangers. It made it just seem like he was ungrateful and he just turned his back on the thing that made him famous, but that's not it. There's been two completely different stories. There's one that Jason told that, like he said, if Kimberly's not gonna be in it, what's the point in Jason? What's the point in Tommy not being in it? You know what I'm saying? Even though Kat's in it, and that's supposed to be his wife, and he's supposed to have a child by her. But then there's that one that Aaron told, and there's like audio clip also of Jason talking about like Hasbro or Disney talking about how like they mistreated him when he came back for the specials. He always came back. How they wanted to like, make money off him and everything with, I think like they wanted to make like a movie morpher and he's all like, look, screw the movie morpher, nobody wants that. They want the master morpher. I'll do some lines and everything, but other than that, he's gonna be like done with the thing because supposedly when he came back for one special, when he had that master morpher, there's this character called Laura Draken or something like that that's in the comics. I don't read the comics, but it's based off of something he's doing for Legend of the White Dragon. And I think supposedly Hasbro heard about that and started taking snippets of it and adding it to like the Laura Draken character. And allegedly he was not happy. This was a character that, in the Legend of the White Dragon, he created to be completely different from Power Rangers to do something completely different and be darker. And here they are taking elements from that and putting it in their comic. And then small snippets went into that one special they did. And supposedly, that made him like mad and stuff. Then they got into an argument because he wanted to expand Power Rangers beyond that of what the kids show was. He wanted to do something similar to Cobra Kai. He wanted to do like a young Tommy show or something different that's more serious. But supposedly they said no, and they said something about you're just a helmet head and you can be replaced or something like that. I'm pretty sure that had to happen during the Disney time and not the Hasbro time, but who knows, you know what I'm saying? And so some other little things here and there. So it was more than him just walking away from the franchise. He walked away for a good reason because he felt disrespected and everything. And so like the Master Morpher was like his last thing to give the fans because he knew they would love it, even though he really didn't want to do it. And I just hate that they didn't mention none of that stuff. But then, they went into him taking his own life. And there are some conversations from the people being interviewed that are very peculiar and everything. Very, very peculiar. Like, one is his ex-wife. I don't know what they all went through. Like I said before, he's only human, so there's no telling, and there's no telling about her. But I've always had a strange feeling about her. Like, there's always been something that's always been off. But then again, like I said before, I don't know what the world happened through their marriage. I was shocked and surprised she mentioned two things and everything in this interview. One of these things I felt like she should, well, actually, two that she should have never mentioned. One, she said that, like, somebody said that Eric and Jason had a rough upbringing and stuff, and she said that Jason was abused as a young child, but she said not by his parents, but she didn't say what kind of abuse it was. So we don't know if it's mental, physical, or sexual. And I'm just kind of like, why on earth would you say that if it's like the really bad one? You know what I'm saying? That reminds me of Twitch boss, Twitch, well, Stephen, Twitch boss, and his former wife, Allison Holker, and everything. When he took his own life, she came out with a book and said that he was sexually assaulted, which pissed his fans off, his friends off, and his family because they never knew about that. And here she is telling the whole world in a book to make money and stuff. But another thing that Tammy said that I wish she really wouldn't is that, she brought up like the marital affair, which, okay, if she doing that in an interview, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? But like everybody knows about that because TMZ reported that he cheated on her multiple times, but to bring it up in this documentary was odd. You know what I'm saying? This is supposed to be the dark side of Power Rangers, not the dark side of your marriage. You know what I'm saying? And then like she went on from there and talking about how she had to serve him the like divorce papers because like that was the only way she could get it through him. I'm just like, why are you saying this? Like a lot of fans still to this day don't like her because it was basically like an ambush. He thought he was gonna sign something for a fan, but instead he got served divorce papers by like, people walk up to him like, you've been served and everything. That's basically what happened to him in front of all his fans, embarrassing him. Until this day, a lot of fans don't like her. I've seen some people because she posted a picture of like the Hollywood Demon thing, and I've seen so many people praise her, talking about you're so brave and blah blah blah, and I'm so thankful you said what you said in the special, and I'm just kind of like, there's a time and a place for all that, and this is supposed to be about the horrible dark things that Power Rangers have done, not the bad things that happen in your marriage and stuff. Then there is like, because everybody knows Sierra, she's a huge Power Ranger fan before this she even got cast. And I'm surprised that like they didn't like talk about her season, how it was micromanaged and how fans picked on them for like, the acting and stuff. But she was basically there and like talk about how like, she was like a dear friend like, JDF and everything and stuff like that. But like two odd conversations came from Jason Font. Jason said that before the other Jason took his life, they had a conversation. He said he's not going to mention what the conversation was about, but he said it was not about Power Rangers and it was not about Tammy, his wife. So what the world was it like about? And could his death been prevented? You know what I'm saying? So we don't know what that conversation is, and he's not going to tell nobody. And so that's just that. But then there is the stunt choreographer, which he mentioned JDF talked about taking his own life back in Mighty Morphin days and everything. But this is shocking because a lot of fans did not know that. I never watched JDF's like, YouTube page. Maybe he talked about it. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. But like he said that he's about to say something and fans are probably going to get mad. And I could not understand what the world he was saying. I should have put the closed caption on it, but I didn't. It was something about, JDF said something about he doesn't want to be an old shriveled up man dying on like a hospital bed or something like that. And then he talked about like taking his own life and something about a conversation they had where he's like, okay, but let's get through this filming first or something like that. And so, I don't know what the heck is up with that conversation. I have to rewatch that, but that was just kind of odd, you know what I'm saying? Then like Dr. Drew was talking about how like, JDF would talk to like the fans about their mental health and their depression and all this other stuff. And Dr. Drew said, this is why professionals should talk to people about this and not other people. And I get what he's kind of saying. Like it's kind of like when you hear other people's problems, it makes you sad and depressed. And I think he said JDF was bipolar, I think, because he was taking bipolar medication. I'll get to that a little bit later. And of course, if you're bipolar and you're suffering from some stuff, because I've heard JDF on Power Rangers Playing Back talking about how he's called the two girls in the middle of the night, text them, and he's had problems, and they've listened to him, and they didn't go into detail, but this man was going through like a lot and everything because he was still dealing with the grief of like his brother. He's had like he was married before and he's married this time and things were going bad, and and his four kids and everything, which yeah, he has more than just one. And just a whole bunch of other stuff. And like when you take in other people's problems, it does upset you, and it tends to bleed into your own problems and stuff. I remember I was in college my freshman year, 18 years old, and I was going through something. And so I went to my friend who was across the hall, and I was trying to like, talk my problems out. You're supposed to talk your problems out. You just can't keep it bottled up inside. And she literally told me, hey, look, you're my friend and everything, but I can't deal with your problems right now because I'm going through my own and I just can't hear this stuff right now. And so I understood, and, so I get what Dr. Drew's talking about. But then they found some prescribed medication drugs in JDF system that results to bipolar medication and other mental illness medication. And Dr. Drew said, these medications are totally fine. It's just when you abuse them, that's when they become bad. But then on that list of drugs, they had the word cocaine on there. And I'm just kind of like, but he didn't check that one off. I'm like, okay, why is that word there for? And I like, please say JDF wasn't doing that. That I hope that's not what they was alleging to, but just didn't want to say, because they talked about that dude who tried to kill JDF at the convention, who got about like 20 years in life, and the dude's all like, and the dude said JDF's like does this and a drug dealer, and I'm like, what the world is he talking about? And like and but then I saw that word on the list of drugs. I'm all like, please say it's not that. Like, I hope to God it's not that. Like, I really hope it's not that. And so, yeah, like that man, oh, it's so sad. Like, I wish he could have got help, man. Like, before he did what he did and everything. And like, 'cause he was like everybody's favorite, you know what I'm saying? And he loved his fans and stuff. But when it came to like JDF, the one person who didn't speak about him that was not on this documentary was his personal assistant, that Francis woman. I would have assumed if anybody was going to talk about him, it was going to be her. Maybe they didn't contact her. Maybe she didn't want to do it. Like, who knows? You know what I'm saying? Because like I said before, I'm really shocked and surprised a lot more people involved in Power Rangers wasn't in this documentary, and some other things that never got mentioned. Like, I'm really shocked at the whole David Yost thing being completely absent from this. And it's just like, like, it's just crazy because I would assume more people would have been in this thing and talking about, like, their experiences in Power Rangers and what they saw behind the scenes and, like, this and that. But, it wasn't. And I'm also surprised Shooky Levy's ex-wife, I forget her name, something Brown, who was in VR Troopers. Like, she has nothing but horror stories and everything from being with that man. So I'm surprised, even though she's not, well, she was technically in Power Rangers, I think, when she guest starred. But, like, I'm surprised she wasn't in this. And so, yeah, like I do feel like there are small details some fans don't know, and that will be interesting to them so they can get more of a perspective of like, what happened and stuff. But honestly, in my opinion, it's stuff people already knew, you know what I'm saying? So there's really no point. I would suggest just watching an actual real interview with an actual former Power Ranger star. However, you gotta think about the hardcore fans. What they hear in this documentary, they're not gonna probably want to believe anyway, because every time a Power Ranger person does something bad, they don't want to believe it and everything because they still see their hero in that person's face. But that person is not their hero on screen. They're an actual person, you know what I'm saying? And that's something Power Ranger fans need to understand. Who you see on screen is not who you see in real life. Just because they're nice in real life at a convention don't mean nothing because they want your money and everything. Also, I'm surprised they didn't have the triplets or talk about them in that meltdown they had that one time and the stuff that happened at the convention. Like, I'm really shocked and surprised they didn't mention any of this. You could literally do an entire season of this show just on Power Rangers alone if more people would speak out and if they took certain other topics. I'm still shocked they didn't mention the whole David Yost thing. Like, I really am. Um, I'm shocked and surprised they didn't mention anything about Blake Foster. He got bullied as a kid for being on Power Rangers and stuff. And I think I remember reading something years ago that he wanted to fight JDF years ago because JDF pulls those pranks. Apparently he didn't like it or something like that. I don't know. I can't find that article no more. Also, I'm surprised they didn't mention how he bullied Abraham and how he got into a argument with young Rocky and everything, who's now all grown up, the Mike guy. Because seriously, is like Blake Foster homophobic or something? Because he got into two arguments before, well, two former Power Ranger actors, and they're both gay and everything. And one he actually fought in an MMA fight and knocked out and everything. Because, it was a MMA bout and stuff. But it's just odd how he got into two arguments with two former Power Ranger guys who just happened to be gay and everything. I don't know, man. You know what I'm saying? Like he's from the '90s. Them former Power Rangers from the '90s. They're a little sketchy. You know what I'm saying? Alrighty. Well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.